This is really about being free to create what you want your life to look like. We each are our own hero. And how do we take the challenges that come our way and see those as the birth process of us becoming heroic? Can you meet that judgment that ultimately will surface with neutrality?
This is the Wall Street Coach Podcast with Kim Ann Curtin.
Welcome back to the Wall Street Coach Podcast. It is me, Kim Ann Curtin, and Lucas Peterson here to talk about a topic that is very important. This topic every trader can relate to and every human being can relate to. And this is the topic of how to have a healthy relationship to your trading. And again, we could put into your life, to your work. Hi, Lucas. How are you?
Hey, Kim, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm not experiencing currently a healthy relationship to my work. So it's perfect timing that we're talking about this.
Yeah, I think so.
So I'm just being full disclosure for our listeners because this is not a perfect science. It's not like you do it once and you're done. Like it's like constantly having to recreate a connection to what's off balance, what's out of whack, and then coming back to center. So I just want to say that to our listeners. It's not that I'm suggesting you guys do some of what we talk about today and you're done. It's just constantly being conscious and trying to be back to center and see, oh, I'm going off the rails here. How do I get myself back?
Yeah. And I think this happens a lot, especially with traders. I guess it can happen with anyone, but, I think it can be, people get like addicted to it and then also obsessive over, like watching the markets. But then like you mentioned with work, it's also, especially as an entrepreneur, your work becomes your livelihood and it's what you have to do. So then, but there is finding that healthy balance. So
yeah, for sure. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, how do you find that healthy balance, Kim?
I don't always find it. I'm fine to get today. So that's like, but I try to come back to, it's funny. I've referenced this quote a few times about, check in. It's a quote from Cheryl Richardson that says, to check in on, is it possible that the universe has things it wants to unfold to you, but you're so busy trying to control everything that you miss that. And, I'm butchering the quote, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what happens to me. Luckily, I'll have, a friend or colleague who'll just be like, hey, come back to sanity, come back to the fact that you're not in control. And just like trading, I think this is true for entrepreneurship. You can do everything right. You can absolutely be disciplined and neutral, and things are still going to go pear-shaped, as the British say, right?
Yeah.
And so you, at the end of the day, you have to find a way to come to this place of surrendering the outcome. And there's plenty of times where I'm so not surrendered to the outcome. And then I will try to notice, okay, how often this week was I in a place of surrendering the outcome? I'm not saying you don't do the work to get the best outcome possible. That takes time, that for discipline and a dedication. But then at some point you do all you can do and then you got to let it go, like at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, or when you're trying to go to sleep at night, which when I'm really stressed out doesn't happen. But it's just, meditation. If I skip my meditations, I pay a price for it. Mm-hmm. If I don't have time with friends where I get to laugh, if I don't do my outrigger paddling, which definitely is a huge, when I'm angry, frustrated, trying to control it, they say, leave it out on the water, just leave it all out in the water. And lucky for me, I'm getting to go out 3 days a week now. And since I've had a lot to leave out of the water, that's helping. How about you?
Yeah, definitely meditation. If I skip my meditation in the morning, I notice a huge difference in my entire day. It's bizarre.
Wow.
I feel like we
Yeah.
were talking, maybe I don't remember, was it Samantha we were talking about with this?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like brushing your teeth. And if you
Yeah.
sometimes if you don't do it, it's just, and you're like, what did I miss today? It's like, oh
That's
yeah,
right.
that's it.
That's it.
But
Yep.
yeah,
It's a
and then
big
yeah,
deal.
physical activity for me as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I don't have that, I get all sorts out of balance. And
Wow.
um,
What is your physical activity?
it depends. I practice a lot of yoga,
Okay.
various workouts,
Yeah.
hiking. But yeah,
Yep.
so yeah,
Yeah.
I try
Nature
to
too.
get something. Yeah, definitely. There've been a lot of studies around just like getting out in nature and like the
Yeah.
effects of how detrimental like city life can be. So if you are in the city like myself,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have to make time to get away from it. And
Yep.
in my opinion.
For sure. For sure. I think that even in cities, you have usually, if you have a good city, you have access to parks,
Yeah, green
or
spaces.
small
Yeah.
pieces of green. And I love that study that came out about forest bathing in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And how the people that walk through the forest, see a decrease in their high blood pressure and, a slew of things. But I feel like that forest bathing is simply, and even earthing, that concept of like taking off your shoes and just connecting to the earth, and that we don't really do that anymore because we all wear shoes all the time.
Yeah.
But I thought that is really amazing. And even in New York City, I had, this one shaman I was very close to, Charles, who's actually one of the men featured in my book, Transforming Wall Street. And he used to tell me when I would be like, really high strung and freaking out about something, which is very common for me because I have a doctorate in catastrophizing. It's, what I got from my college education or my life education. He would tell me to go take off my shoes and walk in Central Park. And, it was cold out. I was like, Charles, I'm not going to go walk. He's like, yes, you are, because you are not grounded right now. And damn, if it didn't have a huge impact. So
Mm-hmm.
I do think there's something about nature that does get us automatically back to center. But the other thing is breathing.
Sure.
I do practice a couple of deep breath techniques for myself because I know it also impacts the vagus nerve when you're doing true deep breathing. And also the meditation techniques I was taught also can kind of calm your central nervous system. And especially, I'm going to speak to this too. If you've had any sort of trauma in your life, and trauma, remember, can be even from seemingly mundane situations. But if you have trauma, then you will have, like me, you have a tendency to catastrophize. I can go from 0 to 60 in the blink of an eye. And it is not a choice, but it's like my central nervous system is in a state of hypervigilance. And even though I've done a lot of work about the trauma that I went through in my childhood and young adulthood, it's still a hair's breadth away. And certain factors, situations, stories that my mind makes up can bring me back there. And the key is just recognizing, I'm so triggered right now. And I've gone into full-blown full catastrophe mindset. How do I get myself back to center without making myself wrong, without judging myself, without saying to myself, this is so stupid to be so dramatic over because it's such a stupid little situation. That's not going to help me because my whole system is in red alert. And I think the key is to recognize, red alert is what's happening to me now. How do I begin to make the steps to come back down the ladder?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I'm thinking about, especially with this topic around the idea of like overworking or, possibly overtrading or just being attached to the screen from, 6 a.m. to whatever, 5 p.m. Like that's not healthy. And I'm wondering if part of that, speaking of trauma, like the idea of like COVID last year, and if people lost their jobs or, I could see definitely somebody, being triggered to anytime that they step away from the screen or anytime they step away to like take even a vacation or take the weekend off it, because of feeling like there's that scarcity of losing the possible that income again.
Exactly.
So that's something that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that until you just mentioned trauma. And I think we all went through a certain level of trauma in the past
Absolutely.
18 months. So
absolutely, all of us, because of the complexity and unknown. And one of the most dangerous things to put human beings through, even these have been done in kind of a lab setting, it isn't the pain that causes people the pain. It's the unknown of when the pain is coming. Even if they're getting an electric shock, but they know it's about to come, they have the ability to prepare for it. But when it's a random in intervals, that is when people will have much more of a hostile reaction to those lab signs. And that's what we all went through, traumatized through the pandemic, was the unknown.
Yeah.
Nobody knew what was going to happen to them on a plethora of fronts, right? Health, their family, their job, their income, their sanity.
Yeah.
Because all of it was up in the air. And that's what I think was the big, and on top of all of that, disconnection.
Yes, definitely.
Disconnection from loved ones, people, venting, guys getting to hang out with other guys and have a beer and, make fun of each other's shirts like you guys always do. Like you can't do that shit over Zoom. It just doesn't land the same way, know? So I think that is a big part of why it was so hard for everybody. And I think too, because we're all plugged in now, that even trying to sit in a place of neutrality or not, we're all connected. So we couldn't even escape in our being in our home, the constant onslaught of how many deaths there were. Who was saying, I won't wear a mask or I will wear a mask? Like we couldn't escape it because now we had nothing to do or we were stuck at home. And so we have the social media in our hands, constantly giving us a stream of bad news. So you got all the worst case scenarios pouring in on everybody for a freaking year and a half.
Yeah. Social media is another good point. I highly recommend everyone take as much time away from social media as basically every day as possible, but also weekends for sure. For me, at least, that's because you do see a lot of, especially I think of the trading world, people posting what they made that day or what they are looking at, like this really well executed trade that they did. And it's like, that's right. And so it can make your mind think, I need to be doing that. I need to do more. And you always mention like compare equals despair. And I think social media is the epitome of that. And so I highly encourage people to step away from it, or at least be cognizant of how you're using it.
Yeah. Well, you're not using it. It's using you.
That's also true. Yeah, it really is. That is the truth. You think
you're using it, but no, it's using you every single time, Yeah. And it's also read by your brain. I don't remember this part in Celeste Headley's book, Do Nothing. She said that the brain receives that scrolling time as work. It doesn't separate that this is downtime. Oh, I'm just doing something to relax. No, it's actually seeing you as still working.
Yeah.
Which to me is astonishing.
Using up a lot of brain power that you could be using for other things throughout the day. So correct.
Or capping, because she feels our ability to really give something true focus is 4 hours. It potentially is bleeding in to that focus time that is helping you be productive, even at your trading. If you're so busy online, paying attention to what other traders are doing or saying.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
So, it is. And, we're obviously not saying don't interact with people on social media if that brings you joy, but
of course not.
But be aware of what it's doing.
And even if it doesn't bring you joy, like there's times when it doesn't bring me joy, but it's like part of how we stay connected to other people today. But you just have to honor, your just keep noticing. This is all an advocacy of just noticing. Where is it that it potentially goes out of control? And if we come back to the theme in this conversation, how to, trade healthy and or work healthy, I wish there was just like, hey, follow these 5 steps and you're good.
Yeah. Trade for 2 hours a day, social media for 15 minutes.
15 minutes, right. Exactly,
But there's not,
exactly.
you're right. There's no one size fits all with anything.
There isn't. There really isn't. But you know, and another thing too that I wanted to say was the vigilance. Like if you come from a volatile childhood, if you come from chaos in your life, that hypervigilant state is also a state of familiarity to you. It's a place where you actually feel most at home, so to speak. So that could also be informing. And that's what I have to always look out for myself with my, tendency to be a workaholic, is I have to always check in. Is this in service to me building my business? Is this in service to what the vision is that I have for myself? Or is this because being vigilant is my default setting because that's what I had to be when I was young? I had to be vigilant, hyper vigilant. So I want to say that to the listeners here too. Ask yourself, is your hyper vigilance, if you love being a trader, fantastic? And ask yourself, were you having to be hyper vigilant in your childhood? Were you having to be in tune and aware of every single thing? Is it possible that that just is the place where you feel the most safe, is when you're looking around to making sure you're not missing anything? Because if that is what you had to do in your childhood, it's possible now that you're doing that unconsciously, and not because it's in your trading account's best interest, or you're, because you really need to be doing it.
Yeah. It's a great point. I think a lot of things I try to always ask myself is like, what's the purpose of this? And finding the purpose behind it, as opposed to, because a lot of things can be just to stay busy. What's going on there?
Exactly. Exactly. And staying busy, not only is that potentially something that comes over from people's childhood, but it's also culturally respected in a way that not doing things isn't respected. Like, I'm going at 4:30 today, and I'm not working like your typical 5 or 6 or 8 hour days this whole week. I'm going at 4:30 today to go get a manicure and a pedicure. And I feel guilty about it. I feel like, can I do that? Isn't there more paperwork that I have to do? Don't I have to get some stuff for the bookkeeper? Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's crazy. So I'm not telling you, like, you won't sometimes feel guilty or bad. Like, it's not good that I feel this way, but I'm just being fully transparent. I'm like, God, can I even do that? Like, I even this morning, because I saw all that I had to get through today, actually thought maybe I should cancel that. Maybe I should reschedule that. Maybe I can do that next week. Now, I used to go in New York City for a manicure and pedicure, and I worked at a hedge room from like 7 till 7, pretty much 12 hours a day. And I used to go for manicure and pedicures probably every 2 weeks regularly. I haven't even gone for one in, I think, 4 months. And I still am like, should I put it off?
Well, the answer is no.
Exactly.
I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for taking care of your nails.
Thank you. And honestly, the hell with my nails, it'll come off in a day.
Yeah, but it's not about that. Yeah.
It's about just sitting still, being pampered a little bit, having some magazines that I wouldn't normally see if they're allowed back in the manicure shops. They took all the magazines away because of the pandemic. I'm like, that's the only reason I go. It's the only place I read a magazine.
That's funny.
So, but I just, feel like I want to be, honest with people. Like, I get this is hard, but as a trader, your ability to be neutral is of paramount importance. And if you are coming from this place of having to just sit at that desk because you can't imagine not watching the market, I ask you to just contemplate, like Lucas said so perfectly, what is that about? Get very curious about it. Is there some motive in you that is just feeling that same kind of feeling that I speak to as an entrepreneur, that I should be doing more? And question if that's cultural indoctrination or previous challenges in your life that is informing you.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Have we spoken to the most important pieces, you think?
I think so. I hope so. Yeah. I think it's people. The biggest thing is to I don't know, question what you're doing. Like, don't.
Or give yourself a test run of less hours. Like, what happens if instead of trading 8 hours, maybe you trade 4? I mean, here's the thing, guys. And for those listening that are very tactical in their trading, unless you measure it, you don't know.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be fascinating if your trading improves? And you think spending 8 hours at your desk is what's going to make it improve? What if spending less at your desk is what makes it improve? There was this study, did you hear this? I think I probably brought it up to you once before, talked about it on the podcast, where this collection of investors found 2 accounts that their clients had been in for 20 years that somebody had set up and filed in the wrong place. Nobody touched these accounts for 20 years. And they were the best performing in the entire fund.
I had not heard that, but that doesn't surprise me. I mean, a lot of times, a lot of what the market is like, you have to let it work. You have to, I mean, as long as you're reading things, obviously like have a stop loss, but because it can work against you just as easily.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But yeah,
absolutely.
I 100% agree with that. For the most part with trading, it's like addition by subtraction, like and this goes beyond just the amount of hours you're trading, but also like the indicators you use. And it's like, how many things can you strip away? Because it's probably a lot. I think a lot of times, especially with beginners, you just want to build as much into, and then it's like, once you get experience, it's like you can just start paring things away. And I think I truly do believe, and I have worked with people where it's like, we need to do less. Like you're losing, especially in the middle of the day, like get away from the markets, clear your head, get some exercise, get some fresh air.
Exactly. There's a great book. I'm looking now on my shelf to see if it's here. It's called The End of Absence. And it was written 10 years before Celeste Headley's book, Do Nothing. But The End of Absence, he was talking even about how we infrequently, and this book was written 10 years ago, right? Imagine that. He was talking about how none of us seem to have, like, he said, he mentioned the concept of a book, what is it called? A window seat. He said, and you used to sit in a window seat and you maybe read a book for a little while, but mostly just look out the window. Yeah. Just kind of hang out for a couple hours, look at the birds, the lake, if you're lucky enough to have one, whatever. Like the traffic going by, New York City, a lot of those of us who had old apartments, we'd have like a fire, what is it called? The fire
hearth, like what?
No, outside the window, it would let you get out of the building.
Oh, fire escape.
Fire escape. And you could kind of sit on your fire escape outside your window. You could climb out on it, if it wasn't rusty and about to fall down, which luckily mine worked. So I could sit out there.
There's not a fire.
Exactly. But I could sit out there and just watch the passersby, move around in the city and the trucks. And this guy was trying to say, like, when was the last time you had absence where you could do that, where you did it? And he said, where it was nothing but you just sitting and thinking or contemplating or, he's like, yes, it's great to walk in nature. He wasn't diminishing any of this, but he was just trying to say our days are so packed that even on vacations, he's like, we just don't have any absence. And it is so healthy for us to have absence, because in that absence of all these other things, sometimes things seem together. And I feel for traders, especially, understanding the global experience of the world, right? Just these are big, heady thoughts, right? The supply chain, it's a big, heady thought, but you can't get access to that if there's no white space, if there's no, emptiness. We're so filled up. There's no emptiness, which is where I think a lot of amazing life-changing ideas come from. Yeah. So here's to emptiness.
Here's to emptiness. So now whoever's listening to this right now, turn it off and just sit and do nothing and you're on your fire escape.
Exactly. And have some absence in your life. Not absinthe, which you can take with you if you want. But
maybe later that night.
Later that night. You can take some absinthe.
You can get your hands on some absinthe somewhere.
All right, so we'll wrap it up. Please do us a favor, subscribe to the wallstreetcoach.com. We have a newsletter there and lots of information about upcoming exciting things. So please go to the wallstreetcoach.com, sign up, and also please subscribe to our podcast. And if you're game, give us a review if you like what we're saying here on iTunes, because that does help put us in front of more people. And if you think we should be in front of more people, then help us out, huh?
Yeah.
Anything else? Anything else I need to say? That's it. We got it all.
We're covering it. Yeah.
All right. All right. Good. Well, we'll see. We're working on getting a few more guests for the next couple of episodes. So we've been away for a little while. We got really busy there, but we're back now. And thank you for listening. And we will see you on the next podcast. Hui ho.
This has been the Wall Street Coach Podcast with Kim Ann Curtin. You can find out more about her and her team online at thewallstreetcoach.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes. Thank you for listening.